Okay, hello everyone. My name is Putra Pratama. I am student from Pancasakti University Bekasi. Today, I'm gonna tell you about kinds of tests and testing. Whether you like them or not, tests are a way of checking your knowledge or comprehension. They are the main instrument used to evaluate your learning by most education institutions. According to research studies, tests have another benefit. They make you learn and remember more than you might have otherwise. Although it may seem that all tests are the same, many different types of tests exist and each has a different purpose and style. Kind of test. The first, progress or achievement test. Achievement test or progress test measure the student improvement in relation to their syllabus. These tests only contain items which the students have been taught in class. There are two types of progress tests. Short term, short term and long term. Short term progress tests check how well students have understood or learned material covered in specific unit of or chapters. They enable to teacher to decide if remedial or consolidation work is required. Second, long term. Progress progress tests are also called course tests because they check the learner's progress over the entire course. They enable the students to judge how well they have progressed. Adminis- Administratively, they are often the sole basis of decisions to promote to a higher level. Progress tests can also be structured as quizzes. Rather than as tests, they can be answered by teams of students. Rather than individuals, they can be formulated as presentations, posters, assignments, or research projects. Structuring progress tests in this way takes into account the multiple intelligence and differing learning style of the students. Yet many students still expect a regular test as a part of normal learning. Next. Second, proficiency test. This test check learners' level in relation to general standards. They provide a broad picture of knowledge and ability. In English learning, in English language learning, example are the TOEFL and ELTS example exam. which are mandatory for foreign language speaker seeking admission to English-speaking universities. In addition, the TOEIC or Test of English for International Communication checks student knowledge of business English as a prerequisite for employment. And next, diagnostic tests. These tests are used diagnose how much you know and what you know. They can help a teacher know what needs to be repeated or reinforced in class. They also enable to students to identify area or weakness. And then placement tests. These tests are used to place students in the appropriate class or level. For example, in language school, placement tests are used to check a student language level through grammar, vocabulary, reading comprehension, writing, and speaking questions. After establishing the student level, the student is placed in the appropriate class to suit his or her needs. And then internal tests. Internal tests are those given by the institution where the learner is taking the course. They are often given at the end of a course in the form of a final exam. Next. And then external tests. External tests are those given by an outside body. Examples are the TOEFL, TOEIC, EALTS, SAT, SAT, LSAT, GRE, and GMAT. The examples themselves are the basis for admissions to university, job recruitment, or promotion. And then objective objective tests. Objective tests are those that have clear right or wrong answer. Multiple choice tests fall into this group. Students have to select a predetermined correct answer from 3 or 4 possibilities. And then subjective tests. Subjective tests require the maker or examiner to make a subjective judgment regarding the marks deferred. Example, RSI questions and oral interview. For such tests, it is especially important that both examiner and student are aware of the grading criteria in order to increase their validity. And then combination tests. Many tests are a combination of objective and subjective style. For example, on the TOEFL EBT, the test of English as a foreign language. The reading and listening section are objective, and the writing and speaking section are subjective. Next. And then there are 8 kinds of testing. They are as follow. The first, direct testing. Direct testing. Testing is said to be direct when the student is required to perform directly the skill which we wish to measure. As we ask students to read composition if we want to know how well they can read composition, and we ask them to speak if we want to know how well they can pronounce a language. The second, indirect testing. Indirect testing attempts to measure the abilities which underlie the skill in which we are interested. As we test pronunciation ability by asking students to identify part of word which rhyme with each other. And then objective testing. It doesn't require judgment on the part of the scorer because scoring her is objective. It won't change even if the score has been changed. Multiple choice test is an example of the kind of test. And then subjective testing. It requires judgment on the part of the scorer because scoring here is subjective. The grades in subjective testing depend on the impression of the scorer. These impressions are not the same among different scorers. Scoring of a composition is an example of this kind of testing. Next. And then discrete point testing. It refers to the testing of one element at a time, item by item. This kind of testing is always indirect. Each testing involves a particular item. Testing particular grammatical structures in an example of this kind of testing. And then integrative testing. It includes many language elements in the completion of a task. It might involve reading a composition, taking notes while listening to a text, and completing a closed passage. And then norm reference testing. This kind of testing relates one student's performance to that of other student. We don't say that student is capable of doing well in the language, but we say the student gained a score that placed him or her in the top 5 students who have taken in the same test. And then criterion reference testing. The purpose of this kind of testing is to classify students according to whether they are able to perform some tasks satisfactorily. Who perform the task satisfactorily pass those who don't. While we measure student progress in relation to meaningful criteria. Okay, thank you for attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dadin.